Welcome back from lunch, everybody. Now, some feedback we've received regarding our summit is to hear more from students. So we've reached out to the group AAPI Youth Rising to hear directly from them. They're a youth organization taking little actions to make a difference. They're speaking out about Asian and Asian American issues and have ideas for the classroom. We'll have an hour for this session and I'll be moderating. Joining us are Cooper Hong, rising freshman from Bishop O'Dowd, Shubh Doshi, rising 8th grader from Head Royce, Maxwell Wong, rising freshman from Head Royce, and Harita Kalvai, rising junior from the Marin School of Environmental Leadership. They are going to start by taking us through a short presentation and then we'll have a conversation. Cooper, I believe you're kicking us off. It's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Okay. Thanks to Asia Society for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences from the AAPI Youth Rising Rally. My name is Cooper Hong, and I'm a rising 9th grader. I'm a member of the AAPI Youth Rising team, and today I'm honored to speak with you. We put together a short presentation about our experiences from the group and the rally, and we're excited to share our stories with you. So what is AAPI Youth Rising? AAPI Youth Rising is a youth group whose mission is to take small actions to make positive change in our communities. We came together earlier this year in response to the rise in xenophobia against the AAPI community after organizing a Stop AAPI Hate youth rally in Berkeley, California. We participate in events and speak out in public, many of us for the very first time. I joined AAPI Youth Rising and have marched alongside other youth at rallies in the Bay Area. I've also participated in marches organized by other groups against AAPI hate. I admire all that the AAPI Youth Rising team and the other youth activists in our organization have done for the AAPI community. I'm definitely a supporter of our mission, and I hope in expanding AAPI Youth Rising by getting more youth involved in spreading our message. We organize a variety of different events to help our community. In fact, just last week, we phone banked for the National Asian Pacific Women's Forum in support of immigrant healthcare rights. Being able to phone bank with Mina and the others was a great experience. We were able to collectively call 100 different people and help to educate them about the HEAL Act. By taking small actions, we hope to raise awareness about issues of injustice affecting all youth. One of AAPI Youth Rising's first actions was launching the 1180 Pledge. Asian American history is American history, yet only a few Asian American Pacific Islander stories are taught in K-12 US schools. With increasing awareness of the invisibility of AAPI histories, it's more important now than ever to make our voices heard. Can you go on to the next slide? We are also involved in policy and legislative action with other student coalitions, but we wanted to launch the pledge as a symbolic awareness raising campaign. Our pledge serves to inspire youth to ask for at least one class out of the 180 days of instruction that we generally receive in a year dedicated to AAPI history, and for teachers to then pledge to teach at least one class dedicated to our history. We believe it is important to teach the rich culture and histories of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders so that we can learn about how they have contributed to America's diversity and successes. You can check out a link to our pledge in the chat.
Thanks, Cooper, for the introduction. On March 28th, 2021, it was a bright sunny day in Berkeley, California, and I came early to the Berkeley Marina to join the other youth speakers. I walked up to the student speaker meeting area. My mom was volunteering at the rally too, and we gathered near the speaker podium. We watched as over 1,200 rally goers filled the park. None of us expected the crowd that day. Families and diverse community members all came out in support. 7th grader Mina gave the keynote speech, and she shared her hope that we could all take at least one message home and take one small action. Then we heard advice from Berkeley Council members Kessler, Wani, and Robinson, who encouraged us to continue speaking out. Act to Change, Akonadi Foundation, AYPAL, Beyond Differences, and Hate is a Virus shared their advice for youth. Jane Bach recited a poem that she wrote just for the rally. Many youth bravely raised their voices, including even a first grader. When it was my turn to speak, I spoke about the Asian hate crimes that had been going on in America, especially in the Bay Area. I talked about how it's mainly been towards elderly Eastern Asians. Although many of us have known about this, some have even done things to try to fix this, it has still been going on and we still need to be aware and stand up for ourselves. I also spoke about how my parents were born in India, and since my skin is brown, I could be one of the people who gets pushed on the street, who gets yelled at with slurs, or who gets biased merely because of the color of their skin. My main point was, instead of pushing away from others and bringing them down, we should all come together to stop hate and increase love. After we heard from all the speakers, we marched to the San Francisco Bay pedestrian footbridge with the help of Compassion in Oakland, and we hung our signs on the San Francisco pedestrian overpass while we heard motorists honk in support. I'll always remember that day. I'd like to now turn it over to Harita Kalvai, team board member of Beyond Differences, who also spoke at the AAPI Youth Rising rally.
Thanks for the introduction. I spoke at the AAPI Youth Rising rally as a team board member for the organization Beyond Differences. For those of you who don't know, Beyond Differences is an organization centered around combating social isolation in middle schools, especially the isolation caused surrounding issues like racism, sexism, classism, ableism, and homophobia. At the rally, I spoke out about how Asian stereotyping was difficult for me to handle as I navigated through middle school. Since then, AAPI Youth Rising has been involved in other events and rallies in the Bay Area. I joined them in another youth event in San Francisco, where I read a poem about the model minority myth. In the fall, I'm partnering with AAPI Youth Rising to brainstorm projects for the Beyond Differences Stand Up for AAPI Youth campaign. We are working with middle schoolers around the country on implementing AAPI anti-hate curriculum into their school social science classes. Now I'll turn it over to Maxwell Wong, a rising ninth grader.
Hi, thanks, Rita. My name is Maxwell, and I also attended the AAPI Youth Rising rally in March near the Berkeley Marina. At the rally, I heard the youth speakers share their stories and felt empowered to continue learning more. Having this shared experience with so many attendees of different backgrounds and especially AAPI youth speakers really inspired me. I felt comfortable in an AAPI safe space. The speakers that day encouraged us to speak up and demand change in our education systems. Many shared their personal experience about how negative stereotypes and racism have affected them not just during the pandemic, but even in their previous day-to-day lives. Their messages resonated with me. After listening to the speakers, we gathered as 1,200 diverse community members strong to march across the footbridge overlooking the highway. We hung our banners and lifted our signs in support of the AAPI community and chanted in unison while hearing honking in support from the passing cars and trucks. It was one of the most impactful days of my life as an Asian American. To hear and see so much support for a cause was really empowering to me and motivated me to speak with you today. As someone who attended the rally and someone who left inspired, I just wanted to share the simple message that youth have a voice and that we can accomplish a lot of things. We can start small and take actions within our schools and communities. We can partner with family and friends to educate and teach about the struggles that AAPI people face, amplify AAPI voices, support diverse authors and books, make art, and express ourselves. These actions are all ways we can contribute to helping defeat the racism that AAPI people face. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to share our stories with you today.
Well, thank you all. And I just have some follow-up questions for you. I would like to ask all of you your backgrounds because I think it is important, since Asia is so diverse, to hear the backgrounds of all of you as we go through some of these questions. So please do share that. And I'll start with Cooper, our 14-year-old freshman. I know Mina Fedor, who also spoke with us this morning, is the ringleader and pulled you guys all in. But personally, Cooper, can you tell us about your background and what really motivated you, aside from Mina, to go to this rally and spend the day there?
I am of European, Chinese, and Pacific Islander descent. What motivated me to start getting involved with the AAPI community and AAPI Youth Rising was my mom. So she told me about a rally that was happening in San Francisco, and encouraged me to go. And when I went there and met with all the AAPI youth at the rally, it was very empowering, and I decided to stay involved with the organization and try to keep helping out.
And I see from your bio, Cooper, that you're particularly interested in protecting the elderly and women. Can you talk about that? I mean, I can already see the influence of your mother, but are there other reasons why you are interested in these two groups?
Well, obviously, there's been a lot of stuff on the news recently showing what has been happening to API elders and women. And I thought, you know, as a member of that community, I need to step up and help to educate others about us so that they can better empathize with our situation, and so that we can create love for all communities rather than hating each other. Yeah.
Thanks, Cooper. Shubh, moving over to you. You're in 8th grade. Tell us about your background. And then I want to hear more from you about what it was like that day at the rally. Because when you spoke about it, you sounded very passionate about it. And I want to drill down a little bit to hear what that was like for you.
Hi, so my parents were born in India, and then they came here for grad school. So I am Indian. And at the rally, I felt a little nervous at the beginning, but then I just went with the flow and spoke, and yeah, felt pretty good. And the main reason I went to the rally, other than being asked to, the main reason I wanted to go was because I saw all over the news everywhere about all the hate crimes and everything that's been going on. And those people are innocent. They didn't deserve anything. So they didn't deserve for that to happen to them. So I just thought I could contribute and help spread awareness. And yeah.
And you also talked about witnessing what's happening in the Bay Area. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, well, I've seen lots of times when all over the internet, everywhere, I've seen that lots of things have happened in especially Chinatown. Cars have gone on this, I have swerved and tried to hit elderly Asians. People have yelled stuff, and also just the subtle racism that's not physical. And yeah.
Thank you, Shubh. Let's go to Harita, who's a junior now. Tell us about your background and also Beyond Differences, the other organization you're involved with. But also, Harita, the diversity of Asians. We have 48 countries in the region, over 2,000 languages. Can you speak to the diversity of Asians and what you're seeing in the headlines?
So I would say, first of all, starting with your first thing is Beyond Differences. That's actually how I ended up getting involved with AAPI Youth Rising, was through Beyond Differences, when Mina reached out to the organization as a whole and asked for a few speakers to come to her rally. And bringing in your second question, I did want to speak, but I didn't know how people would perceive me speaking at a rally, because even though I am Indian, which makes me Asian, a lot of people don't see South Asians as Asians, And to me, that never really made sense because, Asia's the biggest continent in the world and there's so much diversity, but people really only tend to focus on one part of Asia instead of focusing on all the diversity that it has.
You also mentioned the model minority myth. Can you speak to how that's impacted you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of the model minority myth as something positive because all of the connotations behind it are positive. And I know that a lot of people think that it is a good thing to perceive people as super studious and smart and intelligent before they've even met them. But the truth is that that just adds extra pressure onto people and it kind of puts them in a box, Asians don't need to prove anything to you, you don't need to fit into a box. And a lot of people feel like they have to because society tells them to.
Maxwell, you are a rising freshman at Head Royce. Talk about the local experience you've had here in San Francisco around anti-Asian hate.
So sure, I have a personal connection with the Asian American, or sorry, wait, I'm of Chinese and Pacific Islander descent. And I have a personal connection to like Chinatown because I went there with my grandmother, and hearing about all these like attacks on our elderly and women in Chinatown really affected me. And that's really what inspired me to attend the event, other than being asked by my parents.
Well, tell me more about how that makes you feel as an Asian American here in San Francisco, Maxwell.
As an Asian American, I feel angry and scared to go outside, and I feel really sad about what's happening, and hearing about all these attacks on social media, on the news, really affects me. And yeah.
And it's great that you're doing something about it. You're turning that around into AAPI empowerment, as you were mentioning before. Can you share more about the 1 in 180 project that your group is helping organize?
So sure, we're wanting schools to teach 1 out of 180 school days about AAPI history. We want it taught in schools. We want ethnic studies and diverse stories told in schools. And even in like my progressive private school, it's not really happening. We only get celebrated on like some holidays, you know, like Lunar Year or Diwali, and we need better representation. I learned about AAPI history by myself. Schools didn't teach me. I had to go out and learn and read stories by myself. And I certainly feel that we need that in schools. We shouldn't have to go out and learn ourselves.
Maxwell, you're going to have to share some of those resources with us. I'm sure some of the educators that are tuning in now will want to hear that too. Now, a question for all of you is, what advice or suggestions do you have for the teachers who are listening so that they can help tap into everything that you've been talking about and bring it into their classrooms? So I will start with Cooper, but again, what suggestions do you have for teachers? What recommendations do you have to help them out in the classrooms?
For me personally, I think that it's important to make like that extra effort to try and find Asian American authors or other community leaders who are going to help educate your students and your school about API history, and not only teaching about Asia like in the past, but talking about Asian Americans here today and our history in America. Yeah.
So more modern, contemporary curriculum, hopefully. I'll ask the same question to Harita, then Shubh, then Maxwell. Advice or recommendations for the educators that are tuning in here?
I would say that the main thing for me is to see more positive representation, you know, as opposed to just struggles. Because while it is important to talk about struggles, it is also important to talk about the diverse history that Asians have had for centuries and centuries.
And Harita, following up on that, who are your role models, or who are role models that students should be looking to that are Asian or Asian American? Can you name a few?
I would say that the main person that comes to mind right now is Conley Harris, because she, you know, is the first vice president of the United States of America who's a woman, and she is Asian, and she should stand as a positive role model for people who want to be like her.
Thank you for that, Harita. Going to Shubh, your recommendations for teachers and how we can have more content on this topic in classrooms.
Well, like Harita said, it should be more, there should also be like positive representation, not just bad things that have happened to them, not just like struggles. And I think if we're learning something, like if we're on a subject, let's say we're learning computer science, a teacher should bring in something like, oh, Sundar Pichai is Asian and he's a CEO of Google or something. They should bring up Asian leaders and Asian people in subjects that they're teaching. And that's what I think is the main thing.
That's another good idea, and you'll have to keep naming off those suggestions so we can make a list of them as potential speakers. Thanks for that, Shubh. Maxwell, to you.
So sure, I talked about like diverse stories in books and how teachers can like implement certain stories. I read some books about like the gold rush and building the railroad. I read some personal experiences, like other people who relate to me. And I feel like teaching not just from like a Western or European eye, but like actually telling the stories of people and their history. And not just teaching about like Asia, but also teaching about the history, struggles, and also positive representation of AAPI people in America. And yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Who can talk about the AB 101 bill that I see on your website, that you're trying to pass a mandate that the teaching of ethnic studies in public high schools will be required throughout California? Who knows the most about that?
I know a bit about it. I'm not like, I don't have like the complete picture, but I know that for us, it's really important to kind of mandate API teachings, because otherwise a lot of teachers won't necessarily be able or want to add that into their curriculum. But if we mandate it, and then it becomes normal, and there are like, and like even now there are like more resources popping up and stuff. So as it becomes more widely available and it's being taught more, I think that will help to help teachers and help to educate students as well.
Well, that'll be a big deal if you can get that bill passed. So keep us posted along the way, okay? I'd like to go back to Maxwell, to something you were saying earlier about that rally being the most impactful day of your life. Can you share a little bit more about that and where that comes from, Maxwell?
Sure. So seeing the community in like unison, or being together with people who look like you, who like talk about issues that relate to you, is like really impactful. And just being there and being in the presence of so many amazing people really inspired me and motivated me.
So what do you recommend for other students? Maybe the generation behind you that's coming up. How do you recommend that they get involved? I'll go to Maxwell and then Shubh.
Sure. So like going to these rallies, being with people, reading history, learning about your own culture. These are all things that we can do to, stamp out racism and make Asian people seen and heard.
Shubh, your advice to the students younger than you that are coming through the pipeline. What do you suggest they do to get involved with with Asian American issues?
Yeah, not just fellow Asian Americans, also bystanders and other people of other races. They should also take this as an opportunity to learn more about Asian American history, Pacific Islander history. And yeah, they should take it as an opportunity to learn more about it. And then hopefully they'll become a bystander for all like the injustice that's going on.
Great. I do see a question from the audience from Federico Marino asking, is your organization only focused in the Bay Area? Do you have goals of reaching out to other Asian communities around the country? And then how would you do that? Harita, goals of expansion. Are we just focused on the Bay Area, or do you have bigger ambitions for your organization as well? For your two organizations?
So I would say that with Beyond Differences, they are focused right now on the Bay Area, but they're planning on expanding. And AAPI Youth Rising is also focused in the Bay Area, but planning on expanding.
Okay, you want to take a shot at how you're going to do that? You're very savvy on social media, we see.
I think that social media right now is the best way to spread a message. I mean, I know from personal experience that using social media has helped me spread awareness about different causes and join different organizations. So I would say that the main way to expand is just through social media and getting more and more youth involved.
Great. Does anyone have any other comments they would like to share before I go to a last question for all of you? Okay, Cooper, go ahead.
Well, for API Youth Rising, currently we are pretty small and focused on the Bay Area, but we are thinking about, reaching out to more youth and stuff. And if a lot more people get involved, we'll definitely try and spread our message to more areas and just, keep on telling people about our history and stuff.
Good, the persistence.
And the Bay Area consists of 7 million people. So it's not really like we can take baby steps. And so in the Bay Area first, and then maybe expand to like the rest of California.
That's smart, little steps, although 7 million is arguably not a little step, but I know you guys can do it. And so my last question to you is, this has been a really hard time for Asians, right, across the country. And you can either answer, are you hopeful for the future? Or are you proud to be an American or an Asian American at this time? So we'll start with Cooper, then we'll go to Shubh, Maxwell, and we'll end with Harita. So do you have hope and are you proud? And you can answer one or both.
I'm definitely proud to be an Asian American. I love our community and our food and all of our heritage. And I am somewhat hopeful for the future. I don't think this is the type of thing that's going to happen in a year or even like 2 years, but I think over time, I hope that more people learn about our history and our community becomes accepted in the general American eye. Yeah.
Shubh.
Yeah, I think that people should I'm proud to be an Asian, obviously. I'm proud to be in the API community. And I think that other people should just acknowledge that we are who we are, regardless of color of skin, regardless of race, we can do anything. We're not confined in a box.
Maxwell.
So I am hopeful that API people will finally be represented after the racial reckoning. We will finally be I'm hopeful that we'll be finally seen and heard by people around the country. And I'm also really proud to be an Asian American. Our diverse culture and heritage really is amazing. And I continue learning amazing things about it every day.
Fantastic. I am seeing one more question in here. So I will also raise this question before we go to Harita's last remarks for the close. They're commending you on being so engaged, and they're asking what you recommend other parents do with kids of your age. So what do you recommend to parents? And I'll ask Cooper that very quickly before going to Harita. Cooper, what should the parents do?
I think really for a lot of us, what our parents have done is they've given us books and other ways to learn about our history, API history. And I think that even if you're not a member of our community, making sure that your children learn about it too is very important. Because if they see it and they're inspired by it and they're like, wow, what a cool community, that's gonna definitely change their outlook versus someone who's had minimal education about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders.
Terrific. And Harita, you have the last word here.
Yeah, I'm very proud to be an Asian American, and I do believe that as society progresses, people will become more and more accepting. So I am hopeful for the future.
Very succinctly said. Well, thank you to Cooper, Shubh, Maxwell, and Harita, and also Mina Fedor for bringing you all to us. You give us a lot of hope for the future. And now we're going to a session with Asian Kids Pride. Joining us are Aries Wang and Katie Lin. I'll be moderating and we have a half hour. Aries is the co-founder and education content specialist at Polydott. I should also mention to you that Aries has been a volunteer with Asian Society over the years. She's helped us with this program and our expansion into Silicon Valley, and it's been inspiring to watch her develop into the content space. And Katie is an education content specialist at Polydott and Mandarin specialist at Bullis Charter School that's in Los Altos, California. So Aries, tell us, we'll start with you. Tell us about Polydott. This is the company that you started.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Asian Society. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited. So let me just briefly introduce about Polydott. So Polydott is basically a bilingual educational media platform based in San Francisco area, Bay Area. We basically develop bilingual intellectual properties, produce creative bilingual educational entertaining contents for kids, families, and also educators with both Eastern and Western cultural perspectives. I would say we're a very unique company because Polydott is a combination of professional educators and film content production gurus. So, and we also try very hard to connect educators to content creators and available resources from both Chinese and English speaking countries. So far, we've developed several content series, and I can give you some examples. One is called Polydott Cinema, in which we talk about films, and we do a lot of comparisons and analogies between Chinese and Western culture, and we share a lot of culture fun facts in terms of the films, such as The Frozen,哪吒, etc. And another one is called Polydott Kids. It's a reality kids show featuring specifically Asian American kids. It showcases cultural conflicts and integrations through witty interviews, Q&A, little activities or experiments, etc. Well, if you want to check out those videos, we have a YouTube channel, so feel free to search Polydott on the YouTube platform.
Great. We definitely want to check out some of those videos during this session right here, but I love the concept of combining film and video with content. I think that's a great way to reach the younger generations these days. But Polydott, why the name, Aries?
That's a good question. And I think it's pretty obvious, actually. So poly is a prefix in English, which means many, right? And the dots are just literally dots. And as entrepreneurs, we always say that we have to stay humble. We start small as little dots, but we don't want to be just one single dot. We want to be dots. We dream big and we think differently. So in this way, many dots could become lines and curves and drawings, and it probably could become everything. And there is a huge amount of potential hidden inside those dots. So as a company creating game-changing and innovative bilingual educational content, we're trying very hard to redefine how Chinese culture is represented outside of China, especially here in the US.
And so when did you start Polydott officially, and how big is your team now?
We officially started in September 2020. So we are still a new company, and our team is not big, but we do have a bunch of talented people who are dedicated to a variety of areas, including education, business development, content production, cinematography, film production, etc. So I would say each of us has really strong background in our respective professional areas. And if you would like to check out our members, feel free to go to polydott.com. It's all on our official website.
Great. We know we can do a lot with small teams, and I know you're very capable of that too. Talk about the films that you do. And there's in particular a short film called The Armor that I think we're going to play a little clip of. But why you went into film, which you explained a little bit, but can you go deeper into that? And then what it takes to put this particular film together?
Yeah, yeah, maybe we can play the short clip first, and I can talk a little bit about why we made this film. So sure. Please allow me to share the screen real quick.
Okay.
Okay.
And the film itself is just a few minutes, so you're only going to play like a minute or a minute.
Yeah, it's just about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. So
the pandemic has fueled anti-Asian racism. Now, elderly Asian Americans are being attacked. A surge in brutal attacks against Asian American seniors in San Francisco. Around the Bay Area, there's been a series of incidents that have left several older Asian Americans badly injured. and at least one dead. Business and civil rights groups in California are now speaking out.
Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings. Do not travel into areas affected by...
身穿战袍，腰系束带，挥洒心膛。
出去买菜了啊，中午回来吃饭。
爷爷。
Okay, so that's pretty much it. So the reason why we made this film, we started to have this idea of making a short film was after the brutal crime towards those Asian elderly and also the Atlanta shooting. Well, from our perspectives, we always think that Asians and of course Chinese has always played an important role in American history. So when we talk about the definition of Americans as Asian immigrants, it is impossible for us to completely ignore our own history, heritage, and culture. So we really want to point out the necessity of learning about our culture, because we think that knowing about our culture, about our heritage and history can prevent us from being affected, well, emotionally or mentally by those hatred comments and also by those negative information. And of course, for younger kids, we think it can somehow help them, protect them from having the identity crisis a lot of them would have when they start to have their puberty, like something like that. So so that's why we shout out the slogan, "My culture, my armor," because my culture is definitely our culture is definitely our strongest armor. So well, since we've been making content for kids, so we thought that it would be a great add-on if there is one video which raises the issue from children's perspective. But what really helped what really helped to make our minds up was an incident that happened right before we started to film the video. The kid actor, a 9-year-old boy who was our first choice of the hero in the video, firmly refused to take the role. We told him that this video would be uploaded to our YouTube channel and it will be released online because he knew that. So he was very scared that he and his family would be targeted by those haters if they saw him in the film. So eventually we had to contact another boy to play the role, which he did a wonderful, wonderful job. But right at that moment, we all knew for sure that we had to make the film. And also that at the same time, we had to do something for our community, for every Asian families. So that's why besides the film, we felt the urge to create also some educational contents to enrich kids' appreciation of their own heritage and culture, and also help Asian kids to embrace their cultural identity. And in the meantime, we also want to encourage parents to start having conversation about races, about discriminations, about stereotypes with children, because they know, children actually know what's going on and they are scared. So we have to start as early as possible.
I thought that film, and it was under 3 minutes, but it captured so many things, cross cultures, cross generation. Let's talk about the production a little bit. Where are you pulling your talent from? Are you pulling them from America, or are you going to China? Where are you getting the actors and the filmmakers?
That's a good question because we are based in Silicon Valley, and it was still, well, we shot that film during the pandemic, so it's impossible for us to go back to China. So we definitely reached out to our own community. So the whole thing was shot here in the Bay Area, and we were lucky that we could have this wonderful and professional production crew and also wonderful little kid actors to somehow pull this whole thing together.
And what is your aim for the videos? I know it's up on YouTube, but eventually where do you want all of these videos to go?
Well, we put this video up on YouTube so that everybody could see, and we want to really raise awareness, and also I'm sure a lot of you guys would feel relatable and probably resonated, and that's definitely one of the effects we would like to see. And that's a good question, because when we made that video, we were also thinking about, we don't want it just be in one thing, like a one-time thing, because we made that video in April and it was released in May during the AAPI Heritage Month. So we were kind of like thinking probably after the Heritage Month, people would start to forget about it. So that's why we also created a lot of the educational content, which is the Asian Kid Pride you see on my virtual background. And probably we will talk about that later, because we think with educational content, we can definitely have a long-term goal. We can bring those very wonderful, very diverse Asian cultures, Asian American stories, those role models to more younger kids, so that they can have a better understanding about their culture. They can actually be proud of themselves, and they can really know who they really are as Asians, as Americans.
And one more question before we bring Katie in, and that is, you want to put the videos up on YouTube and bring them into the classroom. What are the other storylines that you have in mind? Have you thought about other stories to bring?
Well, there are a lot, including what we are creating right now for the Asian Kids Pride. So we have, just like I mentioned earlier, we have the Polydott Cinema, right? We have the morning stories on the table. We have the Polydott Kids Show. So besides those touching stories related to what's going on in our society, we're also trying to focusing on a lot of the traditional things, but not just the traditional things, but also a combination of the traditional and the contemporary. And we're also trying to do a lot of analogies between Eastern and Western. And also we're trying to combine the Eastern and Western so in this way, kids won't be bored, or they won't feel that they have to learn this because they are of the heritage, but really looking into the interest of those kids so that they can really enjoy learning, and they will be curious and they will be proud to share those contents.
Definitely. The analogies and then comparisons are important, and it's so hard to do that well. So before we dive into the content side with Katie, Katie, can you share some of the misperceptions that you've seen in the media around Asians and Asian Americans? And that probably is one of the reasons you decided to do the work that you do. But can you share things that you would like to see addressed or improved?
Actually, I just heard this story from a friend, not necessarily in the media, but really just around us, from our kids. There's also the misperceptions. So one of the friends actually shared her story about her kids, that every time when they go to the supermarket, the kids will complain about why the Chinese are always loud at the supermarket. And that type of image already set the root that the American-born Chinese may avoid admitting their cultural identity because they feel a sense of shame. However, if you know the background story about the Chinese culture, you may have a different perspectives on this. For example, then I remember, because at the first reaction, my thing is, yes, they're probably too noisy. We shouldn't do this. But then when I go back home and I really think about this one, is my grandmother always took me to the local market in Taiwan when I was little. I still remember the smell of the meat and the noises right after I walk in. The noises were actually the conversations between the vendors and the customers. They were greeting each other, chatting, right? And it just, bargaining. So the local market is really the place to connect with the people. So even in the supermarket here in the US, you don't have to do all these things, but it is actually still a habit. It's kind of like our culture to discuss about the food, what are we going to cook for dinner? So really to find out the reason behind the story, to understand the culture, the way they act, are actually the ways to build understanding of the differences and to minimize the culture gaps. And Aries also a really interesting story she can share with you on YouTube about the misperception as well.
Well, let's go to that.
Okay, so it's talking about the same thing. So I remember years ago there was a YouTube video went viral. So in the video, the YouTuber was kind of like baffled by the attitude of the cashier in a gift shop in China. He didn't know a word of Mandarin, but from his perspective, the cashier sounded really angry and impatient. So he asked this question in front of the camera: why Chinese people are so rude and loud? And when you scroll down the video, you would see hundreds and hundreds of comments pretty much saying the same thing, like, yeah, they're just loud, they're always loud and rude, why can't they just be polite, and why can't they just lower down their voices? Well, the video is no longer on YouTube because it was so controversial at that time, but anyone who understands Mandarin, if you could have a chance to watch that video, and if you can, if you could hear all the cashier was saying in the video, you would know there is nothing related to rudeness. She was just doing what every cashier would do in the world, serving the customer. Well, she was a little bit loud though, but because the shop was crowded, she has to talk to people in order for them to be heard, to hear what she said. So, and also ironically, if you search the question, Chinese people being loud and rude, there are actually a lot of video talking about the same thing. And there is even one question thread on Quora. I mean, there are rude people everywhere. There are polite people, people of good manners everywhere too. Well, for me, it's definitely not some uncanny characteristics you will only see in China. So it seems pretty obvious to me that all those people who made those comments or who asked those questions, they didn't take history and culture and language into consideration.
Well, Aries, we're expecting to see one of your next films on this topic. And Katie, going back to you, I remember those night markets in Taiwan very well. That's part of the whole culture and the essence of being there, right? But Katie, let's talk about the curriculum that you've developed for Asian Kids Pride. These are bilingual classes targeted at 3 through 12 years old, right? Can you tell us about the curriculum?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm going to have Aries to actually talk about the themes first, and then we can also dive in with the curriculum.
Sure.
Yeah, so let me just introduce a little bit about this Asian Kids Pride. Well, because we know that Asian American histories and also a lot of those diverse cultures were definitely not amply mentioned in our K-12 education. So on the long run, we would like our stories to be heard and learned. And we also want to promote to younger kids because they need to have role models to look up to, just like what you have mentioned in the previous session. And they need to have stories of their own people, which they can take pride in when growing up. So, and we always mention in the education industry that we should have mirror and window contents, mirror and window stories. We learn a lot about African American, we learn a lot about white people, etc. We have windows to look out, but for a long time, Asians are a lack of mirror contents through which we can really reflect on, through which we can really think about who we are, and that's why we initiated our AKP, Asian Kids Pride project. It's not only for Asian families, but also for anybody who is interested in learning about Asian culture in an entertaining way. And we're glad that we received support from Asian Society, from Asian American Education Project, and many picture book authors. There are basically 3 themes under the AKP project. The first theme, we mainly focusing on award-winning and best-selling picture books. And the second thing, we're focusing on visual arts. And the third one, we're focusing on the films. And we develop educational and entertaining content to show kids how Asian culture, heritage, and history can be presented and reflected through characters' life journey, through arts, through their careers. And when we talk about Asian culture, we want them to know that it's not just some far away old cliches which are not cool at all, and the kids have to learn it because they are Asian. We want them to know that traditions and cultural legacies can creatively be intertwined with contemporary elements and pop culture. So right now on our website, we've released our first unit under the first theme. It's called The Power of Being Myself, and it's specifically focusing on Chinese heritage. And the book we choose is an award-winning picture book called The Queen of Physics. It's written by Teresa Robson, and it tells the story of a very prominent Asian American physicist, C.S. Wu, Madam Wu. In Chinese, you would say Wu Jianxiong. And we developed 5 sections for this whole unit. And I'll just share a screen real quick once again to show you what are those 5 sections so that I don't need to say one more time. Okay, let me just share the screen real quick. Okay, so these are the 5 sections. Well, basically, there are 3 to 4 video lessons and activities under each section. And since we know about like kids, they have Zoom fatigue, and usually parents would have screen time limitations for kids as well. So each video is just about 3 to 4 minutes, very short. And we have our own learning ecosystem, which is we both have online self-paced video courses, and we also have face-to-face live sessions. So as you can see, throughout this 5 sections, we covered her immigration footprints. We talked about her identity as a lady from China and then became an American citizen. And we also talked about her social impact, her professional contributions, and we have specifically a section about Mandarin, about Chinese language. So that's pretty much it, the whole section. So from my perspective, I would say it probably is the first course focusing on cultural identity. And we have a wonderful group of people working on this project. We have Katie, me, and also we have parent education professionals who help us develop social emotional learning activities and parent education activities specifically for parents. So it's not just a job for kids, the parents also had to learn something. So I believe for a lot of our customers, it's a must-have, and we received a lot of positive feedback from our customers saying that the content is very mind-changing, and it instead of focusing merely on academic issue, it's more like foster and cultivate kids' soft skill. So if you don't mind, I would like to share the screen one more time to show you a short video clip of one of our videos. It's going to be just 35 seconds.
Please do.
You might have noticed that on the cover of Queen of Physics, C.S. Wu's most iconic outfit is qipao with a white lab coat. C.S. Wu grew up in an era when qipaos were the most prevailing fashion. For her, qipaos were as commonplace as the t-shirts and leggings we wear today. The qipao was also as high-end as those Disney princess gowns and dresses girls wear nowadays for parties and special events. She wore a qipao to work, to social outings, when conducting experiments, to conferences, for nearly every occasion.
Yep, that's it.
And I would like to also just based on the clip and talk a little bit deeper about our curriculum. So take qipao, for example. So not just within just only partial of the clip. Actually, after talk a brief history about qipao, we also want to move to, because I also heard the previous the speakers, the younger generations really talk about they wanted their voice to be heard. So when we're really designing these curriculum content, we're also thinking, how can we really combine the contemporary art, for example, fashion, and really hear their voice instead of just from our perspectives. So for example, at the end, we also have, the fashion designer like Lauren Xu. We kind of like really take a look at how they really combine the elements like from qipao and also combine the elements really with nowadays the fashions. It really worked and worked very well. So everybody can really enjoy this beautiful, traditional clothing instead of just like wearing during the Chinese New Year or any important performances. And we also have the activities after the video to really encourage the kids to think about this and how can they really design something to fit for themselves. And another thing, the previous speaker also mentioned that they don't want we just like fit in one box, like so-called American culture, but it's really, really important for the kids to think about who am I and what do I actually have? Maybe there's a multiple cultures in one, right? But we really want to hear their voice, not just like a dump all what we think it's really worth for them to know, but really combine all the voices together. Yeah.
Yeah, the power of being myself. I think that's so fitting for right now, especially. I also like the actress that was in that the clip just now. Well done.
It's me.
So what advice do you have for teachers? How can they get their hands on this? How do you suggest they incorporate it into their classrooms? What do you recommend, Katie?
So as a teacher, I actually had a chance to introduce this book to one of my colleagues. She's not Chinese. She's a homeroom teacher at 3rd grade. And I said, I have this great book to introduce to you. She said, oh, I already have this book. And we talk about this during the story time in class. And I said, did you also talk about anything else about C.S. Wu? She said, not really. It's just the story time. So I feel a little bit like if we can do a little bit more, if she also know a little bit more about C.S. Wu and the background stories and what else she can actually incorporate to introduce the Chinese culture, that would be really wonderful. So that's why we so important our content, even with the videos really short, but followed by that, all the activities that you can do, even with the social emotional learning activities that we can talk about bringing to the kids, those are really crucial. And for many times, the teachers, even parents, we don't know how to initiate those conversations. It's like a taboo, like, I don't know how to say this, so let's just skip that. But somehow it's super important to initiate a conversation. We don't have to answer all those questions, but it's really important to bring these questions and our own stories to the kids so they can really think about it and to probably answer these questions in the future. Another thing I really want to suggest is be open-minded, because for me as a teacher, I always want to try different things and new things, even though, especially in Mandarin class, many teachers would say, I have to teach the language, right? But it's somehow so important that the culture perspective is here and how we can really combine those together. And also very important to how would you initiate a conversation with the kids. That's also what we include in our curriculum and content.
And are these materials available for educators right now?
Yes, we do actually have the teacher's guide sample, which you can see in the chat box here for your reference. So in our teacher's guide, again, that for the social emotional learning activities, we think it's super important for all of us, and also with some extended activities that based on our content, because we don't want you guys just stop here with one activities, but really can go deeper and wider, depends on your school curriculum. So definitely that initiated conversations about the cultural identity. And we also want to make sure when you use the content, you feel confident talking about it.
Aries, were you going to add something there?
Yeah, so I would say that just like Katie said, we need to be open-minded and we need to think about that every coin has two sides. So when we make the content, we always think about that we have to teach our kids to see a situation from different angles to make non-judgmental comparisons. It's not about absolute right or wrong and black or white. It's more like, it's not about like you have to choose the right side, but we really want to foster a multiculturalism and to help our students to become global citizens in the future. Yeah, and we've prepared our teachers a guide for like a sample for everybody, and I'm having a little bit problem sending the file through the chat box, but I probably will do it later. I don't think it allows for a direct file, so I'll just put up to the Google Drive and send out the link to everybody. And we do have a 10% off promo code for everybody who will join today's education summit, and it's AKPEDU, and you will be able to see in the chat box. And if you would like to check out our trial lesson and our downloadable activities, feel free to go to polydott.com. It's all on our website.
We also have the learners and educators version, which is a little bit different. The one that you can see on the website is actually for the individuals purposes. And because due to the copyright and also our education content licensing policies, if you're the educators or your school organizations might be interested in working with us, and please reach out to us at hello@polydott.com. We're the new company, but we're also really flexible. We want to hear from your voice. What do you really need for your school or organizations, or even as a teacher? And we're really happy to work with you on that.
Well, thank you, Aries and Katie. Congratulations on your company. Thank you for the generous discount and for giving our attendees access. We'll be sure to circulate that to everyone afterwards. We appreciate your creativity and definitely look forward to those upcoming films.